honorable ambassadors, representatives of the Algonquin people, leaders and members of Jewish and Polish communities in Ottawa, members of the diplomatic corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs. Witamy, shalom, welcome at the premiere screening of the documentary Saving the World Entire, Rescuers During the Holocaust. Je m'appelle Karolina Gliman-Dolarska et j'ai le plaisir d'être votre maître de cérémonie ce soir. The evening program features opening speeches from representatives of the patrons of today's event, the screening, and a panel discussion with Holocaust survivor Eva Cooper and filmmaker Naomi Wise. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez accueillir l'ambassadeur de la République de Pologne au Canada, Monsieur Witold Dzielski.
Honorable veterans, honorable Holocaust survivors, excellencies, ambassadors, leaders and members of the Polish and Jewish communities in Ottawa, religious leaders, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by thanking the Polish Canadian Congress and the Polish Combatants Association in Canada for hosting us this evening at the Polish House. Many thanks go to Eli Rubenstein, International March of the Living Educational Director, and Dr. Karen Palayew, Jewish Federation of Ottawa Vice Chair of the Board and past Chair of Ottawa March of the Living Committee. I would like to extend special thanks to my colleagues, Ronen, His Excellency Ronen Hoffman, the Israeli ambassador, for his embassy's role in co-organizing and co-hosting this event today, as well as to Her Excellency Sabine Sparwasser, the German ambassador. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're deeply honored to have among us survivor Eva Cooper and David Moskowicz, as well as director of the documentary Saving the World Entire, Rescuers During the Holocaust, Naomi Wise. Last but not least, I would like to highlight the role of two young people, Justyna and Joshua, who, as representatives of younger generation of our communities, agreed to get involved in the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial Remembrance Project. Dear friends, in recent weeks I had 4 conversations that both led me to coming up with with organizing this event and gave me additional food for thought as to our continuous necessity of preserving the memory of atrocities of the Second World War, including the Holocaust. First person was Piotr Cywiński, longtime director of the Memorial and Museum Auschwitz-Birkenau, former German Nazi concentration and extermination camp. With Piotr we go way back. We know each other well and have run a number of projects together. In the midst of our conversation on unrelated topic, he started discussing the video project that the museum was planning for the 78th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And so together with our partners from the March of the Living Canada and the Polish school in Ottawa, we found 2 representatives of the young generation to participate in the project, Justyna and Joshua, mentioned before. Their voices were recorded last week and will be aired by the museum during the remembrance event and made available to the entire world to hear. For Poles, Jews, as well as Germans, shying away from the history of the Second World War is not and should not be a solution. Therefore, I looked for an opportunity to build a bigger event around the involvement of Justyna and Joshua. This led me to the conversation with the director of March of the Living Canada, Eli Rubenstein. Due to health matters, he cannot be with us today. I discussed with him the content of our event. Originally, I was thinking about the presentation, a special speaker, concerts, any other presentation, and Eli offered a new March of the Living film production. And what a moving documentary that is, we'll have a chance to see it quite soon. Eli and his colleagues also had a number of very good additional proposals to the program. By the way, let me say that March of the Living is one of those organizations that is doing a spectacular job in preserving and passing on the memory to next generations all over the world. The organization works closely with Auschwitz Museum. I know for myself, for I participated twice in those spectacular events. Once in the role of a co-organizer, as I was responsible for the participation in the March of the Living of the Poland's President Andrzej Duda and Israeli President Reuven Rivlin in 2018. The third conversation I had with the President of Polish-Canadian Congress Ottawa region, Elżbieta Komsta, and President of the Polish Combatants Association here in Ottawa, Jerzy Kulczycki. Both expressed a very positive approach to hosting this event, and I hope that there will be other opportunities to organize jointly initiatives in the area of Polish-Jewish affairs to the benefit of both communities. My embassy is open to similar initiatives in the future. The fourth conversation I found very inspirational was one with Irene Tomaszewski, a Canadian of Polish origin, who, after receiving the invitation to our event, expressed her concern that observing the liberation of Auschwitz may not be understood in Canada. As you know, the so-called liberation of Poland by Soviets, by communists, had in fact no liberation in mind. Soviet forces led to a de facto new occupation, oppression, killings, destruction of Poland in all the possible spheres. Indeed, the broad context of the so-called liberation is absolutely horrid. However, the liberation of the camp by the Red Army is a historical fact. On January 27, 1945, the Red Army entered the largest German Nazi death camp of all, Auschwitz-Birkenau. Soviet forces found this vast complex of industrial-scale murder almost empty. The SS guards had taken their prisoners on a death march to the west, while those too weak to march were shot, leaving behind only 7,000 prisoners on the verge of death, some of them children. And so, no wonder all the survivors have always called this day a day of liberation. We owe it to them to keep the true language of history alive. In 2005, the United Nations, marking the date of liberation of Auschwitz, established the International Holocaust Remembrance Day to help remember the tragic fate of the Jewish nation that was meant to be eradicated by the Nazi Germany. In Poland, for obvious reasons, we preserve the memory of the Holocaust, but also preserve the memory of millions of people of non-Jewish backgrounds that perished during the Second World War. Mind you, the war took the lives of 6 million Poles. Half of that group were Polish Jews. In April 2022, Poland's President Andrzej Duda, the previous year, marched in the March of the Living for the second time. The message of this year's march was the importance of passing on the responsibility for remembering and educating about the Holocaust to the next generation. Let me provide you with a quote from the Poland's president. I quote, "We always say that we participate in the March of the Living, so it never happens again. That crime was born out of hatred. Today, we read the transcripts of the conversations held by the Russian military with disbelief. These are conversations of ordinary people filled with hate. We come here to show that although it was possible to wipe out my country from the map, murder Poles and Polish Jews during the Second World War, it will not happen again. And there is absolutely no consent to killing the Ukrainian nation, and that every nation has a sacred right to live." End of quote. Indeed, despite the lessons of history, the experience of human tragedy, destruction, and devastation, today once again we are witnessing a horrid war in Europe. Unfortunately, once again human lives are lost, mass murders committed, cities, villages, and settlements destroyed. And so our obligation is to bear witness to the atrocities that are an element of history and oppose such acts today and in future. Poland today, hand in hand with numerous allies, including Germany, are providing support to Ukrainian heroes fighting for freedom, security of Europe, and fighting in order to protect democracy. We remain strong in our convictions, for we have learned that from our history. Dear friends, we gather here today to watch the documentary, Saving the World Entire, Rescuers During the Holocaust. A powerful testament to the courage of 4 Polish rescuers, awarded Righteous Among the Nations titles, who risked their lives to save Jews during Holocaust. We are also going to listen to a conversation between survivor Eva Cooper, one of the film's characters, and filmmaker Naomi Wise, and the young representatives of the Polish and Jewish communities in Ottawa, Justyna Korczyński and Joshua Friedman. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Good evening, dear survivors, Ambassador Dzielski, Ambassador Swarwasser, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests. It is an honor to be speaking with you here at the Polish Combatants House, and it is a pleasure to be here alongside many of my colleagues from the Embassy of Israel. I would like to acknowledge Polish Ambassador Dzielski, as well as the distinguished speakers and guests from the community, and thank them for hosting this beautiful event ahead of International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Tonight, as we recall the impact of March of the Living through film and discussions, we are reminded of the extraordinary opportunity it presents for youth to see the atrocities of the Holocaust firsthand on the land where it occurred. Holocaust education is truly the bare minimum our youth need these days to stand up to Holocaust denial, distortion, and revisionism in our society. Experiential education such as March of the Living and local engagements like this allow youth and survivors the collaborative opportunity to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive and strong. With Holocaust denial and distortion ever present, the stories, many of which are still being uncovered by Holocaust historians over 7 decades later, these stories remind us that it cannot be left up to the Jews alone to defend ourselves. We need allies in our corner, defending, supporting, and speaking out against Jew hatred in all its despicable forms. The State of Israel, through Yad Vashem and many other important Holocaust education centers, continues to contribute to the study and preservation of Holocaust scholarship. With fewer and fewer survivors, it increasingly becomes our role to ensure that the Holocaust can never happen again. As the late Holocaust survivor, Nobel Peace Prize winner Elie Wiesel once said, "Action is the only remedy to indifference." I once again thank the Polish Embassy and its partners for putting on this evening's program. Thank you very much.
Witam, Shalom, Willkommen. A warm welcome to all our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Polish Combatants Association in Canada, I welcome everyone gathered here today to the Polish Combatants Hall in Ottawa, founded by veterans of the Polish Armed Forces in the West. Today's ceremony, organized on the occasion of the 78th anniversary of the liberation of the German Nazi concentration and extermination camps, Auschwitz, and International Holocaust Remembrance Day, it is a reminder to never forget the tragedy experienced by the Jewish people. It is my privilege and great honor to make a few remarks on behalf of the Ottawa branch of the Polish Combatants Association. The Polish Combatants Association was formed at the end of World War II by Polish veterans of the 2nd Polish Corps serving under the leadership of General Władysław Anders as part of the British 8th Army. about 100,000 citizens of Polish Jewish origin were also members of Polish armed forces. After the war, many of them wanted to go to Palestine to restore their homeland of Israel. This was met with a categorical ban on the part of the British command, but received the tacit consent from the headquarters of General Anders. Those who remained shared the fate of many Poles serving in the Polish armed forces in the West. Unable to return to a communist Poland, they went into exile and formed the Polish Combatants Association. Two such heroes were members of the Ottawa branch, Captain Adam Bardach and Lieutenant Henryk Jedwab. Allow me to share two short vignettes. Known by the more typical Polish name of Henryk, he was born with the more traditional Jewish name of Chaim Joel Jedwab in Kalisz, Poland. He was wounded in action 3 times and was decorated for bravery 24 times. Henryk was twice awarded Poland's highest wartime decoration, the Order of Virtuti Militari. His other medals included the Polish Cross of Valor, the Monte Cassino Cross, and the French Croix de Guerre. Henryk Jedwab was a member of our branch here in Ottawa. He passed away in 2005 and is buried in the Field of Honor at Pointe Claire, Quebec. Franciszek Pazławski, an officer with the Polish Home Army, was also a member of our branch. For his merits in saving 3 Jewish women during the war, risking his life and the lives of his family, he was awarded the title Righteous Among the Nations by Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center in Israel. This honor is awarded to non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. The memory of these brave heroes and those who perished in the German Nazi concentration camps will be ever present with members of our branch and passed on to next generations. Thank you to each and every one of you for your participation here today and for recognizing the significance of today's commemoration. Honor their memory. Cześć ich pamięci. Thank you.
Welcome everyone, and thank you Ambassador Dzielski, Ambassador Dr. Hoffman, and Mr. Semrau for sharing such meaningful words. As Carolina said, I am Karen Palayew. I am Vice Chair of the Board of the Jewish Federation of Ottawa and past chair of both the Ottawa March of the Living Committee and the Coast to Coast March of the Living program. I am so honored to be here this evening, and I am only sorry that my dear friend Ellie Rubenstein, National Chair of the March of the Living, cannot be here with us. As many of you know, Ellie is a brilliant Holocaust and human rights educator and was recently appointed the Order of Canada for the tremendous work he has done for over 30 years. The March of the Living is an educational program where Jewish high school students from around the world travel together, spending 1 week in Poland bearing witness to the tragedies of our past, and then 1 week in Israel celebrating the survival of the Jewish people. The students have the incredible privilege of traveling alongside Holocaust survivors who share their personal stories of survival and loss. Through the program, the students are given a broad educational experience, learning about the long history of Jews in Poland, the rise of anti-Semitism, and the ultimate genocide. They learn about the victims, the perpetrators, the bystanders, the collaborators, and the righteous among the nations. Part of the goal of the March of the Living program is to empower the students to commit to Holocaust remembrance and education, and for them to become strong voices within the community to speak out against racism, hatred, intolerance, or discrimination towards any individual or group of people. This evening, we gather to honor and commemorate the righteous among the nations. And we have the privilege of watching the first formal screening of the film, Saving the World Entire. Having previewed the film several times over, there is one line that takes my breath away each and every time. One of the Polish righteous among the nations interviewed in the film says, and I quote, "It was just a normal human impulse." To date, Yad Vashem has documented and honored over 28,000 Righteous Among the Nations from various countries. While I am sure there are many more that we don't yet know about, these individuals represented a tiny fraction of the population. In a time of overwhelming indifference, both in Europe and in the world at large, there was this small minority of people who had the incredible inner strength and conviction to uphold the most basic of human values. Psychologists have looked at personality traits of the righteous among the nations. Amongst others, a few common characteristics include a strong sense of social responsibility, a commitment to the principles of justice and equality, and empathy with a profound ability to connect to another human being's suffering. The righteous among the nations give us hope for humanity. Their stories show how one person can make an incredible difference in the world. We must all learn from and teach our children and future generations about the righteous among the nations so that moral courage becomes, quote, just a normal human impulse. Thank you.
I now invite you to the premiere screening of the documentary Saving the World Entire, Rescuers During the Holocaust, directed by Naomi Wise.
Before we start asking the questions and everything, I would just like to say what an amazing documentary. You captured a beautiful aspect of a human nature during a time when there was just an incredible job. Is there anything you would like to add?
Congratulations, and thank you for your participation as well, Avakutar, in this documentary, and for your creation and bringing everyone together to tell a very important story.
So I'll start with the questions. So, Naomi, what inspired you to choose Righteous Among the Nations as a topic to cover pertaining to the Holocaust?
Thank you for your acknowledgement. I mean, I think the film is moving because of the people and the stories that appear in the film. The topic was part of I made about 4 films as part of the March for Living. We had come up with 4 different topics. So this is the 4th of the films that I made, and I have always been interested in this subject matter because of, I mean, I think it's important to have memory and to learn about the Holocaust, but it's really important to learn about what we can do during these times, to learn about social justice and about what it takes to stand up when people are doing otherwise. And so I'm so inspired by all the people in the film and all the stories, and so that's it's one of my favorite films to be able to make. Yeah.
Nice.
So a question for perhaps both of you. What are you most grateful for? And what would you like to share with our younger generation about what is most important in life that we should be grateful for?
I think that life is beautiful. I think my gratitude is for being alive and for the gift of life that was given to me, not once, but twice. I think there's nothing more important to be grateful for. It opened up possibilities for me to live a very full life, a loving life, a life full of people. People I love, my family, my friends, my community, and an opportunity to be involved in work that was important to me, in which I made a difference to many people. and to be able to give back to the community in a sense. In that since my retirement, I've involved myself in Holocaust education, where I feel it's not only my job, but I feel that it's a commitment that I've made to myself, especially with the rapid death of so many survivors. There are a few of us left. And I think that's a mission. It's a calling for me to spread the word and to inject the memory into younger generation, like the two of you and all the students that I speak to almost on a weekly basis, because they have to become the witnesses. Very soon there will be no real witnesses of people who have actually lived this story. And I'm very fortunate, because I was a baby. I have no personal memories of atrocity. How much harder is it for Holocaust survivors who are adults, or who are even 5, 6 years older than I, who have those memories, and who have lived with those memories, and who have used those memories to spur them to start life again, to build new lives, to start families, to contribute to society in whatever countries they're settled in. And we're all over the world.
Absolutely as well.
It's a hard one to follow. I mean, I feel like I'm like all of you in terms of having reasons to be grateful. But I've had I have a wonderful family and I have children, and that's always so beautiful experience. I think making documentary films has really allowed me to see the world and to meet so many people. And I think what I'm left with is just a passion to learn and to keep learning. And I think that's what really motivates me. It just feels like there's even, I've made so many films about the Holocaust for the March of the Living. And there's always more to understand, learn, and figure out. And I find that really is something I'm very grateful for, to be able to be doing this and to be able to be in the opportunity to keep learning. Thank you.
So Eva, could you please tell us how you were miraculously able to reconnect with Sister Clara, and what emotions were you experiencing when you met her again?
I survived by many miracles, but this reunion with Sister Clara was another. I have no notion of who she was. I was told by my father that I had been saved in a convent for blind children in the south of Poland, close to the Czech border. I was never interested in returning to Poland. I didn't have any friends there. I had no family there. My children and my grandchildren, one of whom is here, because my grandson Matthew is here with us tonight, knew my story from the time that they were very young. But I was never motivated to return to Poland. But my younger daughter, not Matthew's mother, but his aunt, Felisa, who was named for my mother, had a compulsive need to learn about the Holocaust. And as a child, all my kids read about the Holocaust, but she had a compulsive need to study more, to learn more, and to reconnect with that history. And I think she felt, through her youth and young adulthood, that I had neglected to do that. That it was really my burden, but that she was carrying it. And she urged me always to return. And in 2005, she prevailed. And I went back to Poland with her. I had been told by a friend in Montreal, at that time I was a principal of a school in Montreal, and a colleague of mine had learned from another person, another colleague, who had been to Poland, that there was an American genealogist whose name was Yale Reisner, who lived in Warsaw for 12 years, and that he could help me. Now, I did research before I left on the internet of convents in the south of Poland that might have saved children, or might have had children during the war, and I called each of them. I'm fortunate in that I speak Polish fairly fluently, and I called each of them, and I found one that said they did have children, and I made an appointment for me and for Felisa to visit that convent. But when we got to Warsaw, I felt compelled to call this man, this American genealogist, Yale, because my friend who had given me his name was coming later that year, and I just felt it was rude not to call him after she'd given me the name. So I called him, and he encouraged us to come to see him. We went and we waited for over 4 hours to see him. He was busy. And when I met him, and I started to tell him my story, he jumped out of his seat, and among maybe 1,000 books in his shelves, he pulled out one which is called My Life is Worth Yours, by a woman whose name was Eda Kurek, who wrote this book as a PhD thesis. He started to thumb through the book because he said he had heard something about this just recently and he couldn't remember exactly what it was, and he thumbed through the book till he came to a paragraph and he read it to us in Polish. Felisa doesn't speak Polish, but I translated for her that the Franciscan sisters in the service of the cross during the war, they had, before the war actually, had an organization or an institute for the blind just outside of Warsaw in a place called Laski. And during the war, because the bombs were falling, 85% of Warsaw was totally rubble. What you see on TV today when you look at the Ukrainian cities, that's what Warsaw looked like. And as the bombs were falling on their heads, they were very worried about their own safety and, of course, the safety of their children. And they divided the children into small groups and sent them into the rural, into the countryside for safety. And I was not saved in a convent. I was saved in a farmhouse in the south of Poland. And he read this paragraph that said that a sister, whose name is Klara Jaroszyńska, in a place called Bukowina, which is near Zakopane, it's a tourist area in Poland, had saved the life of one Jewish little girl. And of course we were speechless because we were quite sure that this little girl was me. He gave me the contact information, and after some problems, I reached a nun at the Institute for the Blind and explained to her who I was and why I was there, and asked her if it was possible that someone who was with me 60 years before, at that time, could possibly be still alive. And she said incredibly, yes, Sister Clara is alive. I said, what is the state of her health? She said, well, she's been blind for 5 years at this point. She had glaucoma, which was not helped by surgery. But otherwise, she's very well. Her memory is intact. Her sense of humor is wonderful, and she will be beyond excited. You have to come to see us. And of course we did. And as I explained in Naomi's film, she opened her arms to me, and when I went into her arms, I just felt like I'd come home. I had no memory of her, not her voice, not her face, nothing. And yet when I ran into her arms and she held me and I held her, it was such a powerful moment. I really felt like I'd come home. I felt her love. And the feelings there were amazing. I had no idea that I was loved. Nobody during those 3 years that I knew had known me at that time. So this was like a blank in the middle of my life. At the beginning of my life, really. And she filled that role. And I had a wonderful relationship with her for the next 5 years. I saw her 3 more times before her death.
Amazing.
And in that same topic, in a similar way, in terms of resilience, you clearly had to persevere to find Clara, Sister Clara, but also in general, what would you like to share with us in terms of resiliency and overcoming adversity in your life?
I wish I could be clear on this. I wish I knew what resilience was. And I wish I knew how to build it and how to teach it. I think it's a trait, it's a character, which you are born with. You can learn it, and I think adversity helps you learn it. I think it's true that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I know that some people don't think it's true, but I think it's been true for me throughout my life. I've gone through some very heavy times and some very wonderful times, and it's the heavy times that have really built my resilience. You know, I'm a survivor in every sense. I've survived cancer 4 times now. and I survived, as you heard my story. I have a very positive attitude. I think that helps. I think being surrounded by people whom you love, by people altogether, by having social contacts, by being involved in life, in learning. Naomi talked about learning. I think curiosity is an essential part of resilience. I think that all the traits that make us alive, that make us reach out and learn and touch and be with people, and these are all traits that help our survival and that help to build resilience. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Thank you. Yes.
So Naomi, is there any story aside from Eva in the documentary that you have personally resonated with?
I'm kind of going on a blank, and I did. I think I was, I worked a lot, as I said, with Holocaust survivors on the March of the Living. What was really different for me was listening to the interviews with the righteous among the nations and hearing about the war from their perspective and seeing what it was like for them, and really thinking about what is a hero, and doing some reading about it. And I just read recently, a hero isn't anyone special. It's they wake up one day and they're presented with a choice, and they make a choice that is, the right one to help someone. And unfortunately, I couldn't put all the stories of the righteous among the nations into the film because of the time, but the Dutch righteous among the nations was so interesting. What his work was he was a lawyer in Holland, and he had to find a way to change the genealogy of the Jews that they didn't look like they came from Jewish ancestry, and convince the Nazis that these documents, he would say, oh, they were really a bastard son, and they weren't really genetically related, or, and he said, I felt like, doing these little, legal papers, and they're going to determine whether someone lives or dies, and he had so many interesting stories about that, and just also very curious about why these people decided to help, and I think it came from their education, from the families they came from. Some of them were religious, and some of them were just, their parents were very active in social justice, and it got passed on to them. And he just fell into that, and the same with the other righteous. I mean, they didn't all look to go and help, but it happened, and they made that choice. And so I'm always interested in that. What makes us tick and make choices? And
Could I just add to that? Because I asked Sister Clara that. Actually, my daughter Felisa asked Sister Clara that same question, and she said her parents are also listed among the righteous at Yad Vashem because they saved other Jewish families. Her father was a school principal, like a junior college principal, and her mother was an educator, and they saved other families, and they were always taught, she and her sister, who also survived, and who also she saved two Jewish friends, one of whom became a nun during the war and remained within the Catholic Church afterwards. But she said that it was what she had been taught to do, as Naomi said. It's something that was in her DNA. It was something that was a need, and she had, like all the others who saved Jews, all the other among the righteous, who had achieved a level of morality that few of us achieve. And none of us really know what we would do in those circumstances. And hopefully, although the world is looking pretty desperate right now, hopefully we'll never have to find out.
Thank you. And on a similar note, given both of your life experiences, with your lived experiences, and Naomi with talking with those during your career and those of such as the righteous among the nations. Given your life experiences, what are the key learning takeaways that you'd like to share with us today?
I've been on a path around the Holocaust. I really believe Holocaust education is important. We need to know our past. I was always very triggered in a way by this idea of never again, and I find it such a difficult thing to say, because how do we do that? What does that mean? And yes, learning about the Holocaust, learning about our history, learning how it happened, learning about people who helped is important. But I also think we need to really dig deep into the trauma that is passed on from generation to generation by both survivors, witnesses, perpetrators, that we live with these traumas. And I fear what's going to be the next generation. You know, when I see the war in Ukraine and what's happening, you know, what are the people, the children who are living through this war, how are they going to grow up? And that we need to do deep work around the passing on of trauma from generation to generation, because our minds are one thing, but when we're faced in our body with the trauma, that needs to be healed. So I think we have to really focus on healing, and I think a part of healing is around forgiveness, and really understanding the importance of forgiveness, not for both people who have been hurt and by people who have hurt others. To the process of forgiveness can really be a way of healing wounds. And that we need to, how important that's been both in Canada with our First Nations people and, you know, moving through any kind of trauma. So, yeah, I think just learning about being good humans.
As much as I'd like to believe in never again, I think it's been proven that we have not learned enough from Holocaust or from any of the other atrocities that have happened since, and that are happening as we speak now in Ukraine, in China for the Uyghurs, in Burundi, in Syria, in Rwanda. Now this is all in our living rooms. We turn on TV in the morning or at night, and we see it in our living rooms. During World War II, people said, well, we didn't really know. People in North America said we didn't really know. Now we have no excuse, we know. Never again has not happened. It has been again. There hasn't been a massive Holocaust the way it was for us during World War II. But if you are victimized, then that is your Holocaust. So what happened in Rwanda, and General Dallaire, who tried to save people, I mean, this is an atrocity that's inexcusable. All atrocities are inexcusable. And the reason that I do what I do, the reason that I really firmly believe, I've spent my whole life in education. I have to believe in education. And it's one person at a time. And if I speak to a group, and if one person goes home and thinks about what I've said and shares it with people, then that is a change. They become the witnesses that I will not be for much longer. And I think that that's really, really my message to the young people that I speak to, is that, as Elie Wiesel said, and as we heard in the quote, that the worst sin of all is indifference. The people who stand by, the people who do nothing, who watch, and maybe in horror, but they don't help. And I tell young people that I speak to, no matter how young they are, they could be 11 years old, all of you have seen injustice. You've seen kids be bullied, you've seen injustice on the bus, at home, in school, wherever you are. It is your job as a human being to stand up for that person, not to risk your life, but to do something to help, to have a solidarity with that person, to get help for them, and to remember, because I think remembrance is the key. If we don't remember our history, we are definitely going to repeat it, and we are repeating it.
Thank you for sharing.
So on a similar note, we see in the documentary, in the background and the foreground, the capacity people have for both hate and love. What is a lesson you would impart on us today when facing a difficult situation to be more like the righteous among the nation?
They're tough questions.
Wow. How long did it take to come up with that one?
Who knows?
I don't know, there's no formula. I think you have to, you have to have the right values. You have to have, it has to be embedded in you. It has to be the core of you to do what is right. We all know what is right. We all know what is wrong. And I think that we have to admit that we each have the capacity for both. We have the capacity for evil. We also have the capacity for unbelievable goodness and selflessness and sacrifice. And I think to listen to our inner self, to know what is right and to act on it. Not to be afraid to act on it. Not necessarily to risk your life, as I said, but always to stand up for the person that is the underdog, the person who's being victimized, who is helpless, and who needs the support.
I'm just remembering, because I talked to Ellie Rubenstein about this question. Ellie and I work often late at night, and we have these sometimes deep philosophical questions. But one of the things he said to me that I'm now remembering was that most people want to be good. They want to be good people. But they don't always know how to be good people. And that's where the education comes in, is what is a good person. And I grew up I went to Jewish day school, and somehow I think a lot of the Jewish philosophies did somehow sink in. And I recall some of these, like, a lot of the Talmud and the Torah, they're like little laws about how you're supposed to, what you're supposed to do at sunset if it's cloudy out and you didn't know what time it happened. There's all these like little details. But there's like an ethics and a value system that we all are brought up with. And we can't predict what's going to happen to us in our lives or in the future, but we can remember the lessons that we learned and what is the right way to act. And I think what Ali said to me is, yes, we all want to be good people, but it's what is a good person? And that is something we need to learn. We need to teach our children. We need to educate.
Thank you.
To build on that, as well as what you said before, Naomi, about how forgiveness heals wounds, and in the light of being a good person, how have your life experiences, so both of you, how have they impacted the way you approach forgiveness, and what would you advise for us to implement in our lives in terms of forgiveness?
You're supposed to reach out your hand. Forgiveness is a tough one. I don't hate anyone. My first trip back to Germany, which was not back because I've never been there before, I was really worried about how I would feel in Germany. And the people that I met there were lovely. They were not part of the war. They were not the ones that were killing Jews. They were not guilty. And a film that was made, which included my story, which is called Hidden Children, Forgotten Heroes, by a German filmmaker whose name was Kirsten Esch. She was an independent filmmaker, and she made this film because in her own family, she did not know that her grandfather, who was very beloved, he was dead before she was born, but he was very beloved by the family. He was a concert pianist, he was a physician, and he also was the right hand of Dr. Mengele. But nobody told her that. She found that out when she was 35. And she had devoted, up to that point, I met her when she was 45. She'd done 2 films on the Holocaust. And I walked through Treblinka with her, and you saw images of Treblinka with Sidney Zoltak in the film, in Naomi's film. We walked through Treblinka, and we held on to each other, and we were both crying, and she kept saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And I kept saying to her, "Kirsten, you didn't do anything." But whether I forgive the Nazis for what they did, I don't. I don't think it's up to me to forgive. I have lived with the memories, what I've been told. I've lived with the life that I have lived in the face of my history. I don't hate anyone, but I can't forgive that. I don't think it's up to me, and I know there are Holocaust survivors who have done that. Maybe they're better people than I am. I don't think it's my job to forgive, and I don't think that these crimes are forgivable.
So I've talked to Ali also about forgiveness.
Oh boy. He's not here, but he's here.
He's here in spirit. I have a scene that I filmed with a Holocaust survivor named Nate Leipzger. And, you know, I think we can't forgive, we're not in a position to forgive people who aren't here, or the people who can decide whether they can forgive. But
Thank you for sharing.
So, interesting coincidence. But a quote that has always stood out to me is that the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. I believe your story encapsulates that when you mentioned that the 2 gifts Sister Clara gave you. Could you please tell us how that love has impacted how you live your life?
I think I've kind of answered that, Joshua. I think that a child of 3 who is deprived of a loving presence in their life, those are very formative years. And I think that if you're deprived of love at that time, those are deficits that cannot be made up very easily, if at all. And I think that I could not be a loving person who, as I said before, loves my family, loves my friends, loves my community, and thrives on giving back to community. I don't think I could be that person without Sister Clara's love. I think she enabled me to live a full life. I have no doubt that I would have a different life if I didn't have her, because for the first 2 years I had my mother, my father, and I had Sister Clara. And had I not had her, I don't think I would be who I am today.
I think that, you know, a lot of children were hidden, but you were hidden by somebody who showed you hope and love. You know, I'm sure you noticed your mother was missing, but you were able to feel safe. And, yeah.
She didn't feel safe, but I felt safe.
Yeah.
And also to further continue this discussion, and you've already mentioned a bit of what you've chosen to do with education and with you telling stories of people around the world. What would you say your purpose and legacy is, if you were to summarize it? Of course, we have limited time, so.
Come on, take it.
My purpose and legacy. Oh, gee. I mean, I guess a legacy is the films that I've been making and made, and that I can share. I don't speak often about my work. This is not a normal occasion for me. So it's interesting for me because I sit by myself in front of a computer for hours and hours and watch. Like I feel like I know Ava, even though she doesn't really know me, because I've watched all, you see little bits of her story that I've watched her speak over and over again. So somehow that's, I'm not sure how that, I'm not sure what's in my brain right now of all these years of watching and listening to people speak. I'm actually, maybe that's why I've talked about trauma, is I'm also having a second career in psychotherapy right now. And I feel like my capacity for listening and being with people and feeling connection and understanding how important that is for us to really feel connection to people and to be good people. So I just feel so moved by your story that somehow you weren't, the love, how important that was. And that's what we really need to give people. So I don't know if that answered the question.
I can answer for you. I think your legacy is the work that you have done. I think this film and the people that it touches when they watch it, I haven't seen your other films, but this film is spectacular. How you take footage from different places and splice it together to make this whole seamlessly and to make this very powerful film. It's a gift, and that's your legacy. As far as my legacy, he's sitting right there. I think education, the people that I reach, the people that I speak to, I often meet people years later who say, I heard you speak. I remember something that you said. The kids that go home from groups with me and talk to their families, and my story becomes part of their history. I think that's my legacy. That's the impact. And so it's very important to do it. I think it's really important work. For me, it's become essential, and I thrive on it. And people say to me, how can you just tell your story over and over and over? Isn't it boring? Well, the audiences are different, and the way I tell it is different. And the age groups of the people that I speak to is different. And the reactions are different. And when I was preparing for this interview, because I had some of the questions beforehand, I don't know if I was supposed to tell you that. I really didn't prepare because I really like the spontaneity of it. I really think that what comes out from your gut is what's true. That's my legacy. If it rings true, if you remember it, because stories are the most powerful way of teaching. And Ellie, who isn't here, but he is here, his spirit is here with us. I've seen so many teachers in my life, and I've very seldom seen a teacher as gifted as he is. And he teaches through playing his guitar and telling endless stories that I don't know where he puts them in his brain, but he manages to pull out the right one for every occasion. He's an incredible teacher. I think that's a gift. And if I have a little bit of that gift, that's my legacy.
We would just like to thank you so much for speaking to us today, and what a privilege it was.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, all of your stories shared, and the vulnerability, the openness, and your time. Thank you very much.
Thank
Very
Really meaningful questions.
I would like to invite Mr. Ivan Zelkovich, former chair of the March of the Living Digital Archives Committee, who has a special message from Holocaust survivor Sydney Zoltak, whose story of life saved by the Krinskys and an extraordinary friendship with Zygmunt Krinsky we have just so. Mr. Zalkovich, please join me, the floor is yours.
Since I have the mic, please allow me to say a very few words about Naomi Wise. So 10 years ago, I had the privilege to meet and become friends with Naomi when, along with Ellie Rubenstein, we started the Digital Archives Project with the March of the Living. I was a little bit confused when Naomi spoke about these 4 films that she's done for the March of the Living. I assume it's relating to this series around Righteous because Naomi has a habit of underrepresenting herself. I have seen Naomi record and take the testimony and put together documentary films and videos of dozens of Holocaust survivors from Canada and elsewhere. And unfortunately, as our Holocaust survivors are getting older and they are leaving us, I think, Naomi, I think your legacy is going to be that your videos are going to become so incredibly important in the years to come. And I would encourage all of you to connect with her, get her information, and watch her videos. So in 2014, I had the privilege, along with Ellie Rubenstein and Naomi Wise, of traveling with Holocaust survivor Sidney Zoltak to Poland during the March of the Living, where we visited the farmhouse, as you saw tonight, where Sidney and members of his family were hidden by the Krinsky family for 14 months. Meeting Zygmunt Krinsky in person is one of the most meaningful experiences of my lifetime. When I met Zygmunt, I hugged him, and with tears in my eyes, I told him he was a hero. And he said to me, via translator, and whispering, "I'm not a hero. I did what any good human being should have done, and I'd do it again." While Zygmunt is unfortunately no longer with us, Sidney and the Krinsky family have stayed in touch and remain friends to this very day. I spoke to Sidney last week, as I do regularly, and he asked me to convey the following message. Unfortunately, I am not able to attend this wonderful event, honoring the incredible courage of the righteous among the nations. If it were not for the humanity and heroism of Zygmunt Krinsky and his parents, who put their own lives at risk to hide my family when we were running from the Nazis, there simply would not be a Zoltak family that has grown and prospered in this great country of Canada. I remain forever grateful for the selflessness of the Krinskys and those righteous among the nations who are all our real heroes of humanity. I thank you all for your recognition of their courage. Sidney Zoltak.
Mesdames et Messieurs, ladies and gentlemen, let me announce the end of the official part of our event. Wishing you all a wonderful evening. I would like to invite you for a reception. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention. Bonne soirée, bon appétit. Shalom i dziękujemy.